All right, we got the stream going. Let me share that with my students in the Discord chat. Today we are building a front-end login system with React. So I'm just going to get the login component going, and I'm going to get it working with Better Auth, and we'll finish by publishing it to G-Cloud, right? Everything, I've already coded this once, and this is my second time today coding this. So the code should be fairly smooth. Of course, G-Cloud deployment, I always expect a bump or two. A little bit of turbulence with G-Cloud, but that's to be expected. The application that I'm demoing is just the semester-long, full stack MERN app that I call Lawn Connect. It's on GitHub. You guys know where to find it. Here's, let me just do a pull just to show that I should be up to date and that I've got no pending files to change. So I am current with my repo. If you want to clone the repo and kind of start where I'm starting from, you're welcome to code along. Let's open this folder up in VS Code. And did I share the link? No, I didn't. Let me share the link in the chat. Yes, I did. The live stream is called Implementing Login with Better Auth in React Full Stack MERN. Okay. Yesterday, is everyone watching my stream? Ryan, you watching? You good? Yesterday, I was going down the wrong rabbit hole. Yesterday, I was going down this rabbit hole of this site called v0.app. And the thing about v0 is it's not what I wanted to introduce. To be fully transparent, I got my tooling a little mixed up. v0 was not the app I want to use. In fact, if you had to label v0, it's exactly not what I want to bring into this class. And this idea of like vibe coding, and this is not a vibe coding class. You know what I mean? So v0 is not the direction that I want to head. The direction that I kind of knew that I wanted to head, and I just started, is this, it's called Shad CN UI. And the idea is that Shad CN UI, if you guys have heard of it, it's not a component library. Okay, when you have a component library, you bring in all the components into your project. It's kind of like you just bring them all in at once. And a lot of the times when you have a component library, you don't have access to the source code of the component itself. This is different. You can bring in individual components, okay? And you are given access to the source code. This is not vibe coding at all. This is quite the opposite. This is you have control of all of the code. And so Shad CN has components that are styled with Tailwind. So like that's why we wanted to learn Tailwind, is we wanted to learn. Now what does Shad CN focus on? They focus on components that function well, not only in desktop and mobile. Well, how does it react for accessibility purposes? Right? What happens when you use the keyboard and you hit enter or you hit tab? What's happening on these components, again, in mobile views for accessibility purposes? So these components are functional, good working components. And that's what this library focuses on. I say library. That's what these components focus on. They focus on being functional components. They function on desktop, they function on tablet, they function on mobile, they function for people without disability, they function for people with disability. That's what it focuses on. Then you style it how these components look with Tailwind and all that Tailwind can do with grids and everything like that. So this is the direction I wanted to head, and I didn't head that direction yesterday. So we are going to use shadcn, and it's really great because, again, it gives you full access to the source code. And that's what we're going to be using here. Now, on this project, I've got a front end that is built in React, but it's not with TypeScript. And so in my terminal, I'm going to start up a new terminal here. And with shadcn, there's a little bit of an installation process with Vite. I'm just going to follow these steps to get shadcn components working with, again, it's Tailwind and it's TypeScript. That's why we had to learn Tailwind and TypeScript, because there's like a TypeScript, there's like these different TypeScript config files. There's like 1, 2, 3 TypeScript config files, and we just have to modify these config files to work. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to install React with Vite, and instead of using the front end React, that's going to be, I'm not going to use that front end. I'm just going to use, I'm going to make a new folder. So npm create Vite at latest is the command we ran. And I'm just going to tab in, this is going to be my folder name, the Vite project. This is my subfolder. I'm just going to accept that as my file name. I'm going to select React and TypeScript. Okay, so I'm not going to get rid of the old front end folder because there might be source code I want to pull out of that and maybe use. It's okay if you did. It's okay if you did. You could always roll back your Git repo and look at a prior version. I can show you how to do that if you haven't done that before. Okay, so kind of as that's finished the install, we can kind of see here that we've got the thing up and running. Now let me minimize. I have this other folder that I'm going to put on my other screen because this is kind of the completed direction where we're headed. So here's this one. Let me close that down. We don't need that to be running. It's port 5173. Just something to keep in mind. My backend port was 8080, so front end 5173, back end 8080. Back to the installation guide. Again, I'm just kind of following these steps. We install Tailwind and Tailwind for Vite. Now, hold on, teacher. Don't install this in the back end. Let's CD into our Vite project. Because when we're installing Tailwind, we need to install it as a React dependency, not as an Express dependency, right? It needs to be in the front end. This is a dependency for the front end. This is not a dependency for the back end. Okay, now in my Vite project, I'm going to go into my index CSS, delete everything that's in there, and I'm just going to import Tailwind. Now, again, following the instructions, I'm editing these 3 config files. Okay, so the first one is tsconfig. I got to throw in this comma. Okay, so there's one config file. This is to get shadcn. So the process to get shadcn components is different than we were just doing Tailwind before. So this is Tailwind and these new component systems called shadcn. Okay, so here's tsconfig app.json. Go to the bottom of this, which is compiler options. See, here's my compiler options object. I'm going to throw in a comma right here and paste. Notice here, I'm going to come back to this. What this is doing is that this is making an alias for my root directory to be source. So I'll reference this @ symbol, but when we're importing, we can import using this @ symbol now. And it essentially says the @ symbol represents the source directory, right? That's where our source code is going to be. So that's all this is doing. And then again, following the instructions here, I'm going to do an npm install. There's a command to run. Okay, then I got to open up vite config ts. Couple of imports on this guy. And just replace everything that's in there. Very similar plugins, React, Tailwind, and then resolving. Again, this is the same kind of deal. The @ symbol is effectively the source directory. Then there's an init command. And I believe when I was reading the shad CNs that this one's actually an optional command, but I've done it every time because it makes another config file which kind of sets your base color to neutral. It says updating CSS variables in source index CSS. Actually, I say that I thought I read that it was optional, but I'm not skipping it, so I wouldn't recommend skipping it. Okay, so now it says you may add components. Success. So check it out. So I'm going to go to shad CN. I'm going to go to its components library. I'm going to find a button, right? Displays a button, a component that looks like a button. Okay. So how to bring this in? They actually give you the source code here a little bit, but let's just, here is the npm command. You do npx, which is the executor, right? Shad cn at latest add button. So here's the command. Let's see what it does. Notice here, created one file, source components UI button tsx. Source components UI buttons txs. So here, if we actually look at this component, it's got a bunch of classes for Tailwind. You can see some different types of buttons, a default button, an outline button, a secondary button, a ghost button, a regular link. So different Tailwind classes depending on the variant of the button. Different button sizes. Here's the actual component. And it exports a button element and a button variant element, which my linter doesn't love the button variants. So there's button variants. It exports both of them. Okay, point is, this is a component, just as we've just began to learn components. Here's a button component. Now let's use that button, right? So I'm going to go into my app TSX. I'm going to delete the use state, the React logos. I'm going to delete this entire everything that's in here by default. I'm going to import my button from the source directory. Remember I said that @'s going to be your source directory. So it's not a relative file path. That @ symbol is an alias, and that will navigate you to the source directory. So this says source components UI button, which is right here, button TSX. You don't need to provide the file extension. And now that I have this button component, here's a button outline button, which is our variant. Again, you can control click and see the different variants. Maybe secondary, just a button variant of secondary. Secondary button. Let's bring in another button that is our I don't know, let's just try our default, just trying this out. Default button. And if this is working, we should do npm run dev. We got a secondary button and we have a default button. Now these buttons don't have click events. These are the components only, right? And as you've learned theming with Tailwind, you know, you can make your buttons green, you can make them red, you can theme your buttons however you want. I'm actually not going to focus on the theme today because that's Tailwind. I'm going to focus on the components and the functionality. So, okay. Step one, shadcn. Not a component library, but a component system for bringing in individual components. But if you're like me, which by the way, watch the video in the Discord chat because it's kind of funny because well, the one that I'm referring to help you understand shadcn is this one right here from the YouTuber Awesome, Intro to shadcn UI. Because the whole point of this is like if you want to build, if you're a back-end developer, as many of us are, you prefer working in the back-end and functional code over the aesthetics, you really need help. Most of us need help building beautiful websites. Otherwise, they just end up looking like the website from 1995. I got a little humor out of that because I've been, I can certainly make a website look like it's from 1995. So shadcn is going to help us build modern, functional, beautiful websites. Okay, so then if you want to start having multiple components tied together, because right, all these websites are solving the same problems. That's where you have this concept of blocks. Okay, so blocks, the blocks library, notice what I click here, right? I'm going to click on blocks, either up here, right? So if you use the top nav bar, right, we're just clicking blocks, and this takes you directly to the blocks library. And there's a login, and there we go. This is exactly what I'm going to use. Let's take a look at this login form from shadcn. Now, there's really not that many blocks that are pre-built that are right here on the shadcn.com. Shadcn really is all about individual components. They do have some blocks, but really, I don't think they have a lot. Okay. So first thing, bring in a component. Now we're going to learn how to bring in a block, and then we're going to take it a step further after that. Notice that this block is called login01. I'm just going to copy the npx command. I'm going to close it. I'm going to paste. And I believe --overwrite because it has a button, and I'm just going to overwrite the button that's already there. So let me close. I believe the switch is to overwrite the current button that's there. And this is going to bring in a bunch of components. It's going to help me build a login. created 6 files. It created a card, an input. So your input tag, HTML input tags, these are your input type of text box, input type of button. You know, the input is a generic tag in HTML that can be a bunch of different types. We've got a label, a separator, a field, and an actual form. So let's kind of navigate to the form itself. Now notice, look, the UI, these are the individual components. But then the component that uses all the other ones is this login form TSX. So notice my login form has a card. Inside of that card, we've got an input type of email. We've got some labels. So we got labels, we got HTML inputs, another input type of password. So if you want to get good at working with components, I strongly suggest you look at the components from ShadCN. If you want to learn like how to make, because you guys are all new to components, and this is kind of being thrown into the deep end a little bit with components. But component composition, right? You've got this login form that is composed of many other child components. So we got fields, field group. In fact, here's our form tag on line 32. So this is an HTML form tag. There's no form submission at this point. But let's take this login form, and in our app TSX, instead of bringing in these buttons, let's import, let's see how it's exported. So here, looks like a named export. So import login form from, again, I'm going to use @components login form. Notice there's no UI directory here. And let's, let's bring in the login form, run dev. Okay. Could I use Tailwind to get this maybe more, less wide? Sure. I'm not going to focus on the styling right now, right? Because page layout is a whole nother discussion. Okay, we will do page layout with all of this. Okay. Nonetheless, we have a login form. Pretty cool. I agree. Okay. Yeah.
Do we need to transfer all of our stuff into TypeScript or no?
No.
Just the
Front end.
Just the front end.
Yeah. Okay, so now we've got a component. It's a login component. And again, we haven't really hit the styling much. Well, what do we need to do now? I mean, now we're getting to the point, okay, we got the user interface. We want to make this functional. We need the back end. We need Better Auth, right? Better Auth. We've got a Better Auth backend already up and running. My Better Auth can handle email sign-ons and Google sign-ons. So I'm going to get both of these working. I'm going to get my regular users and my Google users able to log in here. And so I'm going to close this. And on the front end, we're going to bring in better auth dependency. Which, when it comes to your front end calling the back end, there's different ways to do it, right? You could use the fetch API, which is built into JavaScript. You could use another dependency called Axios, which we'll use in another context here before too long. But I'm just going to use better auth. You can actually bring better auth in on the front end, and that way it's just already better auth on the back end, better auth on the front end. It handles cookies, it handles tokens, it handles your user accounts very seamlessly. Okay, so because we're using better auth on the back end, my first thought was use Axios on the front end, and then I was like, just on a little bit of researching, better auth is better. You got better auth on the front, better auth on the back. So, so we're going to install better-auth, npm I better-auth. This is on the Vite project front end. And just like on the back end, there's a little better auth config file that we have to bring in. Let me so under the source directory under lib, I'm actually going to put my better auth client.ts inside this lib folder. And here's the code. We're basically pointing at the back end. I got to make this variable, right? This is line 3. This is a .env variable. This should look familiar. In Vite, I don't know why, but it's like a hard rule. All your environment variables have to start with a capital Vite. It's kind of annoying if you ask me, but it's like a requirement of your variable identifiers. Okay, so this basically says, hey, my backend auth client is at, this is basically saying localhost 8080 slash API, and then you put slash auth. So that's basically what this resolves to, this right here. Okay, but in my Vite project, I'm going to click on the folder, and I'm going to make my .env variable. And I'm just going to put my variable right there. Here's auth client. And this basically says, hey, you know, this is a little ternary. Is that a recognized variable? If it is, this is, I could probably just simplify this line a lot simpler, but nonetheless, this is where it needed to be coded to, because from there, as you guys might remember on the back end, we got to slash auth, but then there's also a sign-in email, then there's also a sign-in social, there's a few other endpoints there. Okay, so here's my auth client on the front end specifically. And here's my .env file that points at the back end port, URI, I guess you would call it. Okay, now the beauty of ShadCN, because I have a login form, let's import useState from React. Bless you.
Thank you.
I'm going to scroll down to my email. oops, before I scroll down to the field, let me make my state variables. So right here, after line 23, add a couple of variables. And really all I have to do here is on my email. Let me scroll down to my email input. Okay, so number one, okay, I got rid of the required attribute. Remember the required, that's HTML5 validation attribute. And you guys really know that really ugly HTML5 validation error message you get in the text box and it says like your email is not in a valid format. You know what I'm talking about? Mm-hmm. Like most websites, you get a red validation error message. That's what we're going for. I'm going to show you how to do that instead of the ugly HTML5 pop-up in the text box. Okay, so I got rid of the required attribute here. I'm displaying the user's email, and then on change, I'm setting the email variable. Okay, if you guys have done a React Lab or two, you've seen the syntax before. Nod your head if you've seen the syntax before. Yes, no, yes, yes. Okay, so if you've all done the first React Lab, you should be familiar with this. Okay, same thing for password. I'm just going to kind of change out my password field from this input. Again, this required attribute is going away. That's HTML5 validation. I'm going to show you guys a different dependency called Zod. Remember we got the funny joy validation on the back end? We got Zod on the front end. So we're going to use Zod for front end validation of our... Okay, so now we've got a password variable that's being set. Huh? Is Zod a comic book? I don't know what Zod is.
The comic book character, Superman.
No idea. Is it a villain or something in Superman? ZOD.
Yeah, Zod.
No idea.
I thought you knew.
Guess I'm not that into. How many people knew the Zod character from Superman? Good character, good guy or bad guy? Bad guy. Okay. Well, it should make the library remember. You should be able to remember it then, yeah.
I think it's considered more like an antagonist character.
Okay.
Than a bad guy.
So let's write a function now. Underneath here to handle submit. So when you click the login button, we need, because this is TypeScript, we need to give it a type. So our input parameter is E. This E variable is an important variable that allows us to cancel the default form default behavior. See that right there? E.prevent default. Instead of submitting the form, you're going to do this code instead. Now, right now, all I'm going to do is I'm going to console log in with email, password. Okay. So I'm going to click the button, and it's just going to say log in with the email and the password, right? And if I do npm run dev, if I've done this correctly, I should be able to type into my fields, and it'll log my data to the console. I said prevent default. Oh, I didn't. You know what I didn't do? I wrote my handle submit, but I didn't call it. So now down on the form tag, let me find my form tag. It's going to be equals on submit, form on submit equals handle submit. And let's see now. Okay, logging in with Evan at rankin.edu, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, we're cooking, right? We've got a form, we've got state, we've got event handlers. We're cooking. Let's bring in the Auth client. So up top with our imports, going to import Auth client from source lib. So source lib Auth client. So that path looks good. There's our variable. There's one line required for our variables. We're going to destructure our auth client object and pull out the sign in method. So line 29 is object destructuring to bring in the sign in method. Okay, one more thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make a hook, a state hook for now. This is interesting, right? Because this is like just good old vanilla JavaScript on 27 and 28, but you could do better if you were using TypeScript, right? So TypeScript is our variable is in fact a string that we're starting off at null. So here is a hook for our error. So if there's a bad login or whatnot, we'll show that error. What that error looks like in our markup, let me bring in the error. So right underneath my form element, this is at the top of my form. Line 52 is, and you guys have seen this as well. If there's a value in the error variable, then display this div with that data. Notice this div is just a red background with the error text. So if error is truthy, display that with a red background. Pretty simple, conditional logic there. So now back on our handle submit, here is the logic. We're going to await the sign in method dot email. And I'll just, instead of typing this out, I don't think anyone's coding long at this point. I'll make sure that that's okay. Remember sign in, this is coming from our Better Auth client, right? This is the front end client. We're logging in with our email and password. And then on success, it says login successful. And we set error to null. On error, so if it's a bad email or password, we say invalid email or password. So good login, we console log, login successful. Bad login, we say invalid email or password. Now this should call our back end, right? But right now we're just running the front end. So let's go ahead and cancel that. Let's build npm run build. We're going to build our front end. And now I've got to tell my backend to use my new folder, right? Because I was using a folder called front end. Now I'm using a different folder called Vite project, and I have the dist folder. So if I get out of the front end, let me kind of close. If I get out of the front end back into the back end, right here, it's front end dist, but instead of front end dist, it's going to be Vite project dist. So remember React, you got to run the build script to get it ready for deployment, right? So it's kind of what we're simulating here. npm run build dev on the back end. Okay. Oops. No, I'm on the front end still. Let me go up a directory. npm run dev on the back end. Okay, so 8080. Okay, we got our login form. And if I inspect and just give a user that doesn't exist, okay, let's look. 401 unauthorized, which, I mean, that is right. API auth sign in email unauthorized. Oh, there it is. Invalid email or password. That's what I would expect. If I give it a good user, which is my rankin.edu with a good password, it says login successful. Okay, so we got full stack going on here. Logins with better auth, and I can tidy this up quite a bit more because I'm going to bring in Google logins, and I'm going to bring in some data validation and deploy it to gcloud. Let's see if I'm forgetting anything else. I don't know. It'll have to come to me. So the beautiful thing is once you have Google authentication set up on the back end, it's pretty easy at this point to bring in Google authentication on the front end. So I'm going to go back into source, components, login form. Okay, this handle submit is for your normal email. Here's another handler for my Google button. Notice handle Google login uses my same auth client, sign in social instead of sign in email, provider Google. Callback URL is the root of the application. Now now that we have a logged in user, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go on my front end. I want to manage state on my application using the auth client. So let's, in the app TSX, I'm going to change this up a little bit. This is pretty cool. So I'm going to import auth client. From auth client. Here on at the app level, so remember this is the root component. App is the root. I'm going to use the session from the auth client, which is if you're authenticated or not. We've got a data. The data property that we're creating, we're destructuring this data, is the session, and there's an is pending. So this if is pending is nice because if the page is loading, and you will see this, if you're waiting on the session to be read, it'll just give the user a loading. And if there's not a session, we display the login form. If there's not a session, we display the login form. Otherwise, we're going to if the user is logged in, we could say welcome, session user email, and let's use a button component. What was it? Variant default, I believe was what it was, like this. Variant equals default. So if the user is logged in, again, this is being held in the cookies. If the user is logged in, we'll just say welcome the user's email and give them a sign out button. So let me cd into my Veet project, npm run build. We got to call our handle Google. So here, I believe it's just a click event. Let me double check. I think it's literally on click. Yeah, it is on click. So let's go down to my Google button. And here's my Google button. On click, handle Google login. Let's try that again. Awesome. Let's go up to our backend. Okay, well, I was logged in, right? This is being stored in cookies. And the beautiful thing is you can close this, close your browsers, and the user stays logged in, right? And you could set up that in Better Auth backend. How long does the cookie last? We've seen that. Okay, but now that my user is logged in, I can log out the user, and that takes you to the login form. If I log back in, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, log in, bada bing, bada boom. So we are logging in there. If I log in with Google, choose your Google account, and I'm now logged in with Google. Geeking out over this, but I think this is pretty cool. Next up, because we already have it. If you hit the back end, and here's that HTML5 validation. I thought I took that out, interestingly enough. This is that HTML5. Okay, a little better. But this is because I hit the back end, right? You should never let, if you can avoid, if this is not a well-formed email address, you should never let that hit your back end, right? So that's where JavaScript on the front end comes into play. And so there's validation on the front end, and there's validation on the back end. Validation on the back end is joy. You know, that's how you protect your data validation on the back end. Data validation on the front end, your favorite Superman villain, what'd you call him? Antagonist? Antagonist is Zod. So we're going to install Zod on the front end. Okay? But if you've done joy, you're like, hey, I understand Zod. This is just validation on the front end. You've already done joy, so you're going to understand Zod.
Do we still need it in our thing? No, because I feel like we do that with Better Off with the validation.
Yeah, so yes, you still want to protect your routes on the back end with joy.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if Better Off made the route, then maybe we just do front end validation on those. But all the other routes that Better Off isn't handling, like your /me or / you could still use Joy. Okay, so let's check this out. So I'm going to go back to my front end. CD, V project, clear the screen. Zod. Let's show you npm JS. ZOD. Zod. Anybody heard of Zod or not before? It's not new. It's data validation on the front end with TypeScript. This is a very popular tool. You can see the weekly downloads is in the tune of 13 million. So very popular tool. Let's npm I Zod on the front end. Now, in the front end, in my source directory, I'm going to make a new folder called schemas, not with capital letters. And I'm going to make a new file called login schema.ts. Does Zod go by Z? And okay, well we're going to go by Z. Z represents Zod here, and we're going to make a schema here, just like Joy. We're going to say, hey, it's an email. An email is a string, and the error message is invalid email address. We're going to give a password minimum of 8 characters. Password must be at least 8 characters. So now we can do data validation on the front end. And if it doesn't pass the front end validation, it'll never hit the back end validation. Or the back end, because you know if you don't get a well-formed email address, you know it's not going to be a valid login. Okay, so there's our login schema on Zod. So we have to bring that in on our login component. You guys didn't know that this was going to hit all this theory today. But here we are. Let's go back to my login component. We got to import we got our login schema from source schemas, plural, login schema. And let's scroll down on our handle submit. Let's validate with Zod schema. Const results equals, let's see, login schema, safe parse, email and password. And so here's results. And now we can, just like it suggests, if it's not a success, if result is not a success, we set an error and return. So we're done. We parse our schema, right? We parse our schema, and if it's not successful, we set an error to whatever the error message is. Issues sub 0, so the issues array sub, your first message in the issues array. Wait a minute. I did that in the wrong spot. Good thing I caught that here. We're just doing that up here before we try to sign in. Here's our sign in. So here we do our data validation and set an error. Pretty simple to do front-end validation this way. So now let's do this. npm run npm run build. I can actually do npm run dev here and just npm run dev. I can just do the Zod validation just on the front end. Notice the loading. Do you see that? I was trying to figure out if I've been authenticated or not. So the white screen of death at least gave us some feedback. Okay, so if I do like this, I don't like that it's doing this. Okay, hold on. This is Zod, invalid email address. If I do this.com, this is definitely Zod. Password must be at least 8 characters. That's what I don't like. And I thought by getting rid of the required email type placeholder value.
Could it be in the UI component for it?
In the actual input? No required attribute there. I guess I didn't test that all the way through, but as long as you give it, at some point it does switch to Zod. But okay, let's do this. Let's close cd dot dot npm run dev. So that was only testing the front end, but let's go back to testing both of them together. So now we're on 8080. Let's still test my, okay, so there's, you know, you're not passing Zod there. If I give it 8 characters, now that hit my back end, and now that's giving me from my back end invalid email or password. So it passed Zod, but it went to the back end and it was an invalid login. So if I throw in my 9th character, we're logged in. Log out, log in with Google. Welcome from my Gmail account. Let me hit login with Google. Now it's worth noting that this login with Google, notice I still, on my database, I've got 3 users. I've got my Gmail login, I've got my Rankin EDU, and I've got one I made up. But let's throw at Rankin IT. And continue. Okay, rankinit.com, all the way to the back end, it made my account. Last but not least is to deploy to G-Cloud and see what breaks. What I know is that this env file, this is my .env for the backend. This env, you guys know when we're deploying to G-Cloud, we need to make the environment variables for the backend. But this environment variable gets bundled in with everything in dist. So there's nothing unique on G-Cloud for your front end environment variable. It just gets bundled in when you do the npm run build command. But this .env gets loaded in all environments. But if I make another file So if I go here, .env .production, that this will overwrite the .env file. So I'm going to copy this variable name into here, and I got to get my gcloud URL. This is where I'm going to guess I'm going to hit a little bit of turbulence. Okay, so this is my URL for gcloud /API. This is localhost /API. So let's do another build. And just want to do a little bit more testing before I deploy, because I just did everything so fast. Maybe I got into... Now what are you doing? Oh. You notice? This is really, it's trying to go to... Yes, this makes sense. This will not work because it's trying to use my production. It's trying to use my production URL. All of a sudden it broke because that's what's happened. So I have to try and deploy to get that to work. So let's try and deploy. So that's not going to work anymore because it's trying to use production. Okay, so a couple commands: gcloud set project, right? Gcloud config set project. Gcloud config set project ID. So console, got to get my project ID. Project ID. Gcloud config set project ID. Gcloud config set project ID. Okay. Gcloud run deploy, and then the service name, which is lawn connect -service, all lowercase. Lawn connect -service. Okay. run to the restroom while that's deploying. Okay. There's our interface. Doesn't look as wide. Did I change that maybe? Let's inspect. Let's just throw in. We are logged in. We are logged out. We are logged in with Google. We are logged out. We got some Zod invalid email. We got Zod validation. We've got database invalid email or password. Oh, let me actually give it valid credentials. There we go. I'm gonna type it in right. It works. Cool stuff. I'm curious to see if you guys can use this Shad CN to build your issue tracker components. How might you use these components? I guess the last thing that I want to show you, and this is not anywhere I've gone, I haven't tested this, Shad CN UI block library. So there's shadcnblocks.com. Now, I do know some of these are free. I don't know which ones are free. Certainly this one has this website. It's supposed to be the best one, but I know a lot of them are behind a paywall. And you could see October 28th, there was 100 new blocks. But there's a lot of let's all pay. Let's go blocks. Oh, there was a free. Where's the free button? Free button. Even if you, okay, let's say blocks. How do we filter free here? Price. Free. Check this out. Right? All these components. Like, how many times have you seen this on a website? Like, here's our team. Or hero section. So there's another one. So now that we got free, let's just find hero. This is called hero 1. And then there's your command for add hero 1. So now, as we did earlier, cd vite project. Actually, let me push this. Added React with TypeScript, Tailwind, and login capability, and functional login form. Add a React with TypeScript, Tailwind, and functional Tailwind. Okay. So let me just kind of get that pushed out. Before I continue down the rabbit hole, let me open it back up. Let me go into my Vite project, copy the npx command, now that to me says maybe this is an older version, Shad CN35 versus whatever I was using. So now I've got a hero 1. So if I just go back to my app, if I'm logged in, so if I look at my component, hero 1, export hero 1. So import hero 1 from components hero 1. If I'm logged in, welcome my username. Okay, now this might require, so here you could send in some props, badge, heading, description, buttons. It looks like it wants you to fill these in. Constant hero 1, badge, I wonder if it'll allow me to do this. npm run dev. So it's just going to assume all the defaults, I think. Oh, I'm just running the front end. I gotta run the back end. npm run build. See if it lets me build. Heading, description, yeah. Let me go, instead of me JPEG, we'll do, we'll do the React SVG. String is not allowed. It's got to be an object. Source and alt. Now let's try. Now it builds. npm run dev on the back end.
Would it still be using the production?
It is. The production is still kind of getting in its way. And I got to think about how to. Yeah, it's still using production.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Which I don't love, but I mean, just to get rid of that for now, I could just delete this because I'm not trying to deploy. I just want to see if this works. Close that down. CD. Really just want to test this component library or whatever. Kind of call it component library after I say don't call it a component library. Haha, hi mom. There it is. Okay. That's as far as I wanted to get today, even a step further. Because there's, again, it's not a component library. Shad CN UI block library. And this is the one that I've heard of before, but there's others that I'm less familiar with. And interestingly enough, I don't know what this your website builder is all about. Don't love that. I mean, clearly you guys got to customize this to not have that. Because it's in your code, so you just got to go into the hero and get rid of this kind of deal. this little badge. Your website builder, see that? We don't want you. Go away. Gotta know what you're doing here. Close that. Okay, then you gotta get rid of these chunks. Almost done. Almost done. And then you guys are free. This is not something I'm going to push to my repository anyways. Okay, I got rid of that little badge. Okay, the end. Hope you guys liked it. I enjoyed it. Now we've tied together to the front end to the back end with log.